Lena Carver stood frozen, her hands still chalk-stained, as the dean tore her research off the wall in front of the entire school. "This doesn't belong here," he muttered. "Not from someone like you." Gasps echoed. Cameras rolled. Her formula had just won national acclaim. So why was she being erased? One question silenced the room. What secret was Riverhall trying to bury? And Lena? She had just uncovered the first crack. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Lena Carver had never seen trees that neatly trimmed before. Not in person, not growing out of cobblestone walkways leading to buildings older than her grandmother's wedding ring. She stood on the edge of the Riverhall prep campus, clutching the straps of a second-hand backpack that still smelled faintly of her older cousin's cologne, and took in the world she was told she deserved to be a part of. But it didn't feel that way. Riverhall Prep, in the affluent Chicago suburb of Windermere, looked more like a federal courthouse than a school. Ivy snaked up gray stone walls, students in pressed uniforms strolled past marble fountains, and the American flag above the main entrance didn't wave, it watched. Lena had earned her place. Ranked in the top 0.1% nationally in math and science, she'd aced a series of grueling entrance exams and crushed the Riverhall scholarship interview. She knew the formulas, understood the theories, and spoke in data. But numbers weren't what got her through the doors. It was something more complex. Ambition without permission. Her mother, Tanya Carver, had cried the day the acceptance letter arrived. Not a quiet, graceful sob, but the kind of messy, disbelieving cry that shook from deep within the ribs. "Baby, you gonna be the first," she'd whispered, "first to break it open." But as Lena stepped into the school's granite lobby, heads turned. One student bumped into another, and whispered. Another girl stared openly, then looked away fast. A pair of boys in navy blazers smirked in unison, like they'd rehearsed the reaction in advance. Lena adjusted her glasses and kept walking. In the main office, a secretary with hair as tight as the rules greeted her without looking up. "Name, Lena Carver," she replied. The woman scanned the list and paused, raising an eyebrow as if Lena had mispronounced her own name. Scholarship student. Here's your class schedule. Lockers down Hall C. Number 112. You'll need to bring your own lock. We don't supply those." Lena nodded and accepted the papers. Her hands trembled slightly, though she didn't let it show. Hall C was darker than the others, the windows narrow and high. Her locker sat between one labeled Whitmore, complete with a polished nameplate, and another that had a Riverhall lacrosse sticker. No one greeted her. She didn't expect them to. Her first class was physics, Foundations of Motion. The teacher's name was etched on a plaque above the door. Alden Royce, Ph.D. Inside, 30 desks in perfect rows faced a blackboard so clean it gleamed. On the wall hung a photo of Royce shaking hands with a former president. Lena took the only available seat in the back corner. Professor Royce entered precisely at 8 a.m. Gray suit immaculate, white hair combed like a military parade. His voice was deep, precise. "In this class we don't believe, we know. Belief belongs to religion. Knowledge belongs to physics." He turned, chalk in hand, and began scrawling the day's topic, Newtonian assumptions, and where they failed. The lesson was sharp, methodical. Lena followed every word, jotting notes furiously. She even caught a mislabeling of mass-to-acceleration units in one of his examples, but said nothing. As Royce scanned the room, his eyes briefly landed on her. They stayed for a fraction too long. Near the end of class, he paused beside the board and said, "Riverhall has a tradition. Every few years we present a problem. One that hasn't been solved. A rite of passage, you could say." Students leaned in, some smirking knowingly. "The Riverhall vector problem," he continued, underlining the words with thick chalk strokes. "Posed in 1994. Not solved. Not even approached with competence by anyone under 15. It separates the bright from the brilliant." He looked across the room. "We don't waste time handing matches to those too young to strike them. Genius, you see, is born, not placed by charity." Lena felt the room twist. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, but something deep inside her clicked. It was as if a single sentence carved through years of earned pride. She understood what he meant, even if he didn't say her name. At lunch, Lena found a bench near the back of the courtyard. Students clustered in familiar huddles, laughing too loud, trading private jokes that weren't meant to include her. A girl in ballet flats glanced her way, then whispered to another. They both laughed. Lena unfolded a paper towel from her lunchbox, revealing the PB&J her mother had wrapped like it was priceless. She ate each bite slowly, with dignity. The sandwich didn't taste like home today. By seventh period, the weight of the day had sunk into her bones. She'd said no more than 15 words all day. She hadn't been seen. Not really. But she'd been observed. In the hallway outside advanced math, Lena stopped. On the wall was a glass case, filled with trophies, awards and old black and white photos. Every face behind the glass was white. Some smiled with smug excellence. Others just stared ahead, eyes daring someone to take their place. A soft voice came from behind her. First week's always like this. She turned. A janitor, tall and lean, with tired eyes and a slow gait, pushed a mop. His name tag read Ellis. Don't let him convince you this place was built for them, he said. It wasn't built for anybody. It was just built to keep others out. She didn't respond. Not yet. But the words landed. Heavy. Honest. That night, Lena sat at her desk in the tiny apartment she shared with her mom and younger brother. Her notebook was open to a clean page. At the top she wrote, Riverhall vector problem. Underneath, she wrote Royce's quote, Genius is born, not placed by charity. She stared at the sentence. Then she drew a line through it. The next morning, as students gathered near the bulletin board in the main hallway, Professor Royce stood before them with his usual cold elegance. Let it be known, he declared. This year's Riverhall Vector Challenge is open. Solve it, and you'll earn a place in the Scholars Forum. Fail and you'll understand why some doors should remain closed. He turned to the crowd, pausing as his eyes met Lena's. And let me be perfectly clear, he added, voice rising. No one under 15 has ever solved it, especially not from public school. And with that, Lena knew exactly what she would spend the rest of the year trying to do. Lena didn't come to Riverhall to make friends, but she hadn't expected to feel invisible either. By the second week, it became clear that the unspoken rules of the school weren't taught in any handbook. You learned them in side glances, in seating arrangements, in who got called on, and who didn't. Riverhall's halls weren't divided by race on paper, but in practice the lines were cleanly drawn. The black students, what few there were scattered. Lena could count them on one hand. No one said it aloud, but the message rang through the quiet stares and sudden hushes. You don't belong here. You were let in. Group projects confirmed it. In chemistry, she was left off the initial email chain. In history, her ideas were listed last in the presentation slides, despite being the most thoroughly researched. Once she saw a classmate copy her answer sheet before a quiz and still receive a higher grade. At lunch, seats shifted when she tried to sit. A group of girls once didn't see her tray and took the spot she was walking toward. She didn't argue. She just found a quiet place outside, near the south gate where the groundskeepers stored their tools. One cold afternoon, Lena sat eating alone when she overheard two boys nearby. You hear Royce's little charity pets trying the vector. Let her. Best she can do is break a nail. Lena looked up slowly. They didn't notice. Or maybe they didn't care. That night, Lena came home to find her mother passed out on the couch in her nursing scrubs, still holding a half-eaten sandwich. Her younger brother had finished his homework and set out cereal for dinner. Lena covered her mother with a blanket and kissed her forehead. Tanya Carver worked double shifts, sometimes triple. For years she'd juggled 3 jobs. When Lena got the scholarship, she quit too. So you don't have to worry about money, baby, she had said. Just focus on proving him wrong. Lena didn't want to prove anyone wrong anymore. She just wanted the truth to be seen. Back at school, she noticed a display she'd walked past a dozen times, but never truly seen, the legacy wall. In the center, under glass, was a letter from 1976, a donor's statement that read, Riverhall must always reflect the excellence and heritage of its founders. Lena read it twice, then once more, heritage. She began tracking her grades closely. In calculus, she received an 82 for a problem set her tutor had said was flawless. She cross-checked the rubric and found no deductions listed. In literature, her essay was returned with a vague note, too emotional, needs objectivity. She noticed patterns. Brad Whitmore, the son of a trustee, received glowing praise for answers she could deconstruct in seconds. When he mispronounced a literary reference, the teacher gently corrected him. When Lena raised her hand to clarify a theory in Royce's class, He stared past her like the question hadn't been asked. She started documenting it all in a small leather notebook. Every grade, every subtle slight, every silence that shouted. Then, one Thursday, something shifted. Lena had stayed after school to check her latest physics test. She was certain she had aced it. Her method had been elegant, her logic airtight. But when she checked the return pile, her test wasn't there. She approached the desk. Royce wasn't present. The substitute shrugged and gestured to the bin in the corner. That's where he tosses drafts or corrections. Maybe he forgot to grade it? Lena walked over slowly. The trash can was lined with papers. On top, crumpled but unmistakable, was her test fully graded. 96%. Each answer marked with green ink. A short comment at the end. Surprising approach. Impressive if unorthodox. But the grade had never been entered, and the paper had never been returned. She stood frozen, staring down into the bin, as if looking at something more than just paper. She reached in, pulled it out, and noticed beneath it, another test. Also hers. Also graded. Also discarded. Lena had always been quiet. It wasn't fear. It was strategy. Silence kept her safe in places where every word could be twisted, where being correct wasn't the same as being right, and where eyes already expected her to be wrong. But silence wasn't armor. It was a weight, and by her third week at Riverhall, Lena Carver was drowning in it. It happened during a Tuesday morning lecture. Professor Royce was reviewing multi-body systems, an advanced topic in classical physics. The chalk squeaked across the board as he laid out the standard derivation of a two-mass system moving under a central force. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that came not from awe but from ritual. No one questioned Royce. You copied his notes. You memorized his process. That was the rule. Except this time, the equation on the board was off. Lena noticed it immediately. It wasn't a mistake in calculation. It was a fundamental assumption buried in the setup. The system ignored rotational influence on the force vectors. An outdated simplification, one that newer theoretical models had already improved upon. She stared at the board, heart pounding. She didn't have to say anything, but she did. Her hand went up, slow but deliberate. Royce stopped mid-sentence. His eyes moved across the rows of students and landed on her like a laser cutting through fog. Yes, he said flatly. I think the third line where you cancel out the perpendicular component. You've neglected the torque interaction on the smaller mass, Lena said. Newer field models show that it impacts angular velocity over time, especially in non-conserved systems. The room froze. It wasn't just that she had spoken. It was what she said. Not a question, a correction. Royce lowered the chalk, turned fully toward her, and took a beat longer than necessary before responding. Do you even understand what you're correcting? He asked, voice dripping with controlled amusement. Lena's voice didn't waver. Yes. I've been reading Dr. Lay's 2021 paper on variable field torque. It modifies the Euler equations to account for shifting mass distributions. The math here, she motioned gently toward the board, assumes fixed point stability, which this setup doesn't meet. But a long silence fell over the classroom. Pens froze midair. One student quietly turned to another, their expression blank. It was the kind of silence that settled just before a storm, or an execution. Royce chuckled. Not loud, just enough for the class to hear. Leave theory to those trained in it, he said. Reading a paper doesn't make you a physicist. Real knowledge requires decades. He turned back to the board and kept writing. No one defended her. No one laughed either. They just watched. It was more intimate than laughter, more brutal, like watching someone fall and wondering if they'd get up. After class, the whispers started to sharpen. Lena heard them echo down hallways. Did she really try to check Royce? The scholarship girl? Who does she think she is? In the girls' restroom, she overheard two seniors discussing it near the sinks. Honestly, I kind of admire it, one said. But also, she's gonna get destroyed. Lena washed her hands in silence. The water was scalding. She spent lunch alone again, back near the south gate. The peanut butter sandwich in her hand felt heavier than usual. She didn't eat much of it. Her appetite was buried under the weight of unspoken rules she'd just broken. That evening at home, Lena sat on the floor, textbooks and journals scattered around her like the pieces of a defense she didn't know she'd need to build. Her mother worked late. Again, the apartment was quiet except for the buzz of the old fridge and the faint sounds of traffic below their second-floor window. She reread the paper she mentioned in class. Dr. Lee's work on variable torque fields. She scribbled out formulas on scrap paper, reconstructing the derivation from memory, then added her own adjustments. It made sense. It helped. She was right. She knew it. But Riverhall didn't reward correctness. It rewarded conformity. The next day, Lena walked into physics again. Spine straight, face unreadable. Royce didn't acknowledge her presence. He didn't need to. The room already had. But something else happened. During a brief moment at the end of class, Royce glanced toward her desk. His expression was unreadable. Then, as the bell rang, he spoke with calculated coolness. "Miss Carver," he said, "I assume your expertise extends beyond critique?" She looked up. "Excuse me? You have strong opinions about theoretical application. Let's see if you have strong ideas too." He turned to the whiteboard and underlined the phrase, "Scholars Forum, proposals due." Royce smiled thinly. Not required, but certainly expected of someone so confident in correcting legacy theory. Unless, of course, the theory's easier to debate in private. The class watched. No one blinked. Lena swallowed. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." Royce nodded and erased the board. As Lena packed her bag, Brad Whitmore walked past her desk and muttered, "Hope you like roastings. Forums are where reputations go to die." Lena didn't answer. She zipped her bag and walked out. But her mind raced. That night, she stood by her window, notebook open, city lights flickering in the distance. She felt the weight of it all. Of being expected to fail. Of being pushed forward not as a student, but as a spectacle. But she wasn't afraid. She was focused. She knew the forum wasn't just about physics. It was about permission. And she was about to challenge who got to give it. They started mocking her before she even had the mic. The moment Royce announced Lena's slot in the Scholars Forum, a hush fell over Riverhall. But not one filled with respect. It carried the subtle weight of anticipation. In that silence, her name turned from an accolade into ammunition. Lena sensed it immediately. Casual glances sharpened into scrutinizing stares. Faint murmurs turned into sharp undertones. And the school corridors, once just pathways, felt charged, as if she was walking through a gauntlet. That same afternoon, she discovered the first sign that the undercurrent had taken form. It was a slip of paper nestled among her textbooks in her locker. Folded just so. No name. No handwriting she recognized. Just 2 lines, typed and impersonal. "They don't want you to win. They want you to break." Lena stared at the words, taking a deep breath. It wasn't a threat, at least. Not one that welcomed backlash. It was cold certainty. An observation made irrevocably. No one looked her in the eyes that morning. Not students. Not faculty. Not even Miss Ellis, who often nodded a quiet, friendly greeting in the hallways. She slid the note into her pocket and walked away. That evening, she found Mr. Ellis waiting in the dimmed chemistry lab. The late afternoon light had long since faded, leaving only the faint hum of fluorescent bulbs. Lena was sketching corrections in fading chalk on the lab board. Ergonomic adjustments to torque equations that Royce had dismissed. She had lost count of how many evenings she'd spent here, eyes strained from hours of reading, hands chalk-dusted, mind humming with conviction. Ellis leaned against the doorframe, mop balanced in one hand. "You ever play chess?" he asked, voice softer than the floor beneath him. He always spoke as if every word weighed more than it sounded. She didn't reply immediately. "Chess," he repeated, more to himself. Pawn takes a step forward, and suddenly, she's a problem. She crossed the board. Now they want to know what she's doing here. Lena looked up. Her chalked sketches froze in place. He paused, then said, "They don't want you to win, Miss Carver. They want you to break." Quietly, with no mess to clean up. He left, disappearing into the hallway shadows as quietly as he'd arrived. The next morning, school buzzed with a new kind of tension, one she could practically feel tingle on her skin. Then it got worse. Let her crash and burn at the forum. Can't wait to see Ghetto Einstein fumble. Underneath, another affirmative action just got a stage. Hopefully it's a train wreck. Some students smirked as they walked by. Others hurried past, heads down. She didn't react in anger. She simply folded the paper carefully, smoothed the creases, and tucked it into the back page of her notebook. Every peer interaction. Some smirked, some whispered, some pretended they hadn't noticed. But the damage wasn't meant to be seen. It was meant to resonate beneath the surface. In class, the tension reached a razor's edge. Royce continued as if nothing had changed, but his silence spoke louder. His refusal to engage felt like a calculated weapon. When Brad sneered under his breath, calling her a paper town physicist, the room just watched. The building's silence echoed, louder than mockery. Lena's lunches became isolated affairs. She sat in the courtyard by the south gate, preferring the quiet of where the groundskeepers stored their tools, away from watching eyes. She ate with resolve, each bite tasting of charge and unwavering intent. She stopped texting her old friends from her Chicago neighborhood. She stopped watching young scientists on TV. Even her beloved nightly walk became pages full of formulas and note sketches. Her world shrank into whispers of quantum mechanics and algorithmic fairness. And somewhere in the dark, she built a shield of theory. She never told anyone. She didn't ask for sympathy. Instead, she began orchestrating a silent offensive. Between classes, she brokered one-handed scribbles on doctrine flaws. Every late evening, she taught herself newer models, studied old journals, compared footnotes. She leveraged the Riverhall archive, scanned papers, obscure appendixes, dusty binders locked behind glass. Then the breakthrough came. As she mapped these shifts, she felt sweated hope. Every contradiction felt like a lock opening. One night, buried under stacks of journal articles and archival printouts, she stumbled into the digital basement of Riverhall's internal library. Hidden beneath layers of faculty memos and administrative guidelines, she spotted a scanned PDF from 1989. The author, Alden Royce. Title: Stability of Rotational Fields in Closed-Loop Vectors. With trembling fingers, Lena opened it. Here lay the foundation, the basis for the gleaming, unsolvable problem. Here lay Royce's assumptions. Variable torque was dismissed as theoretical noise. He claimed mass distribution stabilized certain rotational frames, leaving no room for dynamic forces. He disregarded anomalous data. Worse, he coined the very flaws Lena had spent nights correcting. She printed the paper immediately, Bible updated in hand. With red ink, she marked key lines and scrawled 2 words across the top: FLAWEDPREM. Suddenly, the mocking had meaning. Not just hate, strategy. And in that moment she understood this wasn't merely a hidden conversation anymore. It was a controlled narrative, designed to humiliate her before she even approached the board. She closed her eyes. They were already framing the story. But she was done playing the part. And then she realized, Royce hadn't just built the challenge, he had built it to be unsolvable. By design. But Lena had the proof. The Scholars Forum wasn't an invitation. It was a trap. The Riverhall Scholars Forum was not designed for students like Lena Carver. On paper it sounded prestigious. A formal platform for the brightest minds of the school to present original research and theories to faculty, board members, and select donors. Students wore tailored blazers, spoke behind wooden podiums, and stood under spotlights that usually illuminated legacies, not scholarship students from Chicago's South Side. When Lena first saw her name on the official forum lineup, she didn't feel pride. She felt target-locked. She was listed last. Housing speaker. Final impression. Positioned directly after Brad Whitmore, Riverhall's golden boy, and Royce's most celebrated protege. Brad had been bred for this stage. Eloquent, confident, the kind of student who never raised his hand for permission, only to be seen. His presentation? The inherited elegance of Newtonian precision. He had digital slides, animation overlays, a full rehearsal window in the auditorium, and 3 faculty mentors scheduled for his prep. Lena's title? Correcting the Vector Problem. Her format: no slides, no visuals, just a piece of chalk, a worn-out blackboard, and a stool to stand on so the crowd could see her over the podium. The contrast wasn't subtle, it was surgical. She found out in 4th period. A printed flyer was handed to each student by the school's office assistants. Glossy headshots of the featured presenters lined the page, with blurbs underneath, legacy names, ivy-bound ambitions, and family connections mentioned like credentials. Lena's photo was the only one in black and white. Her blurb read simply, Lena Carver, Scholarship Program. Grade 9, Proposed Solution to Riverhall Vector Problem. That afternoon, in the hallway outside physics lab, Brad passed her with a sly grin. From government lunch lines to gravitational law, he murmured. Guess Riverhall really is progressive. She stared past him and said nothing. But inside, the weight settled deeper. Whispers followed her to lunch. She's really doing it. No visuals? Good luck. She's going after Royce's baby. Old or stupid. Why would they let her close the show? The answer was obvious. She was set up to fail. Publicly. Undeniably. The next day she received a note from the administration. Please prepare your presentation for live chalkboard delivery. Due to technical constraints and time limitations, AV equipment will not be available during your segment. Technical constraints. Yet Brad had a projector, a clicker, and rehearsals scheduled. She took the paper and pinned it above her bed, not out of motivation, out of defiance. Later that week, Mr. Hodges, the head of the math department, cornered her in the stairwell. You're aware how big this stage is, right? He asked, tone casual, but lined with threat. Yes, sir. I'm not here representing the program, she replied. I'm representing the truth. He smiled politely. Just don't embarrass yourself, or us. The warning was crystal clear. Even Ms. Rivers, the guidance counselor who had once proudly shown Lena her Riverhall acceptance letter, offered what she called gentle advice. You know, she said over lukewarm tea in her office, there's honor in knowing when to step back from a fight you didn't start. Lena blinked. This isn't a fight, it's a correction. Some corrections aren't welcomed, even when they're right. Then why teach them? Ms. Rivers looked away. I'm just saying, you still have time to reconsider. She didn't. That night her mother found the forum flyer tucked into her notebook. Tanya was sitting at the kitchen table, feet swollen from her nursing shift, sipping reheated coffee. She unfolded the page and stared at it for a long time. They got your face on this? She asked, a crease forming on her forehead. Lena nodded. I'm presenting last. Her mother's jaw clenched. You mean right after all their kids get to go first? It's fine, Ma. No, it's not. She stood and walked over, holding the paper like it was something infected. Baby, I know you're brilliant, but this is different. This is show trial stuff. You really gonna stand up there and challenge their top professor's theory? Alone? They assigned me the slot. They assigned you the slot last, right after his favorite little poster child. Lena didn't answer. Tanya sighed and sat down beside her. Lena, these people don't play fair. They don't let people like us win, unless they pick the game, load the dice, and sell the crowd popcorn. I'm not playing to win, Lena said softly. I'm playing to prove. Her mother stared at her for a long, long time. Then she reached out, touched her daughter's wrist, and said, just promise me, whatever happens, you'll come home standing. Lena nodded. She didn't sleep much after that. Marcus, her little brother, peeked in one night with sleepy eyes. You doing scientist stuff again? He asked. She smiled. Yeah. Big stage stuff. You gonna win? No, Lena said. I'm gonna finish what they said couldn't be started. He nodded. Don't forget to sleep. Even heroes need naps. By the week's end, Lena had refined her presentation to 3 key phases. Identify the flawed assumptions in Royce's 1989 torque model. Introduce the adjusted multi-body instability framework. Propose a new approach using rotational variance corrections. Her own. She submitted her outline. Royce didn't acknowledge it. But that wasn't surprising. He hadn't spoken to her directly since the day he'd announced the forum slot. Then came the night before the forum. She walked past the empty front desk. The lights flickered faintly above. She had the call number memorized. She reached the section, ran her fingers along the spines, found the familiar green hardcover, and froze. It was lighter than usual. She opened the book. Pages were missing. Not loose. Torn, jagged edges. The final appendix, the one with the torque variance tables she had cited in her solution, gone. She flipped through in disbelief. She checked the surrounding shelves. Nothing. Not in the wrong place. Not misfiled. Just gone. Lena ran to the librarian's counter. No one. The lights near the front desk had been shut off. She dug through the book return bin. Empty. The trash? Cleaned. She even peeked into the custodian closet. No sign of Mr. Ellis. The loss wasn't random. It was surgical. Calculated. Someone had destroyed the only printed evidence of her primary reference, the night before her presentation. The library lights dimmed one row at a time. Lena Carver stood beneath the flicker of the final one, clutching the mangled textbook with its torn pages like a wound in her hands. She didn't move, didn't speak. For 10 full minutes, she stood frozen beside the reference shelves, staring down at the jagged gap where Appendix F used to live. Her primary source, her citation cornerstone, her closing argument. Gone. Not by accident. It was sabotage, no doubt. And it wasn't subtle. Whoever had done it wanted her to know it was personal. precise. They didn't just want her to fail. They wanted her unprepared, panicked, and powerless on the stage. But she didn't feel powerless. She felt still. Hollow. Then slowly, filled with something colder than fear. Clarity. She walked across the library, set the book on the checkout counter, then circled through the darkened hallways with no destination. Her mind worked faster than her feet. Every citation was rearranged in her memory. Every proof recalled and reconstructed. Every emotional fracture glued back with calculation. She couldn't go home. Not yet. She passed the janitor's closet and noticed the door slightly ajar. It wasn't Ellis. She hesitated, peered in, saw the empty mop bucket, the spare keys hanging on the wall, and then, almost without thinking, she walked past it and ducked into the narrow utility storage room at the end of the west wing, where they stored overflow desks and AV carts. She twisted the knob. It opened. Inside was darkness, musty and filled with the scent of old varnish and carpet glue. Lena found an unstacked desk in the corner and sat. Her fingers shook slightly as she pulled her notebook out of her bag, not out of fear, out of focus. She had one night, one chance, no margin for mercy. The hallway lights buzzed on and off with the power-saving timers. She took out her phone. No signal. Perfect. Lena opened her journal, flipped to the back, and began rewriting her presentation entirely by hand. Line by line, she restructured the entire argument. She couldn't rely on missing pages now. She had to cite from memory, support with logic, and cross-reference with parallel proofs. Each theorem was drawn like a blade. Every calculation, a shield. An hour passed. Then another. Stillness consumed the building. She was midway through redrafting the second principle, rotational velocity in asymmetric frames, when the door creaked open. A silhouette stood in the doorway. Tall, lean, familiar. Figured I'd find you here, Mr. Ellis said, holding a steaming cup in one hand. She stared, a little dazed. He stepped in, placed the cocoa on the desk beside her, and looked around the cramped space. You know, back in the 80s, we had a kid tried the same thing. Stayed overnight. Hid out in the old music room. Thought if he just studied hard enough, wrote smart enough, he'd break through. Lena looked up. Did he? Ellis smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He left, quietly. No goodbye. No record. Just disappeared from the rosters one day. She swallowed. Why? Because this place doesn't break you like a wave, he said, sitting slowly on an upside-down bin. It drains you like a leak. 1,000 little silences. 1,000,000 ways to erase you. Lena sipped the cocoa. It was rich, warm, and slightly burnt. Why are you still here then? She asked. He chuckled low. Because I've got eyes. Ears. Memory. They can ignore me. But I see everything. That boy, I remember his name. His face. You're not just smart, Lena. You're stubborn. I can't back out, she said. Not now. Not when they want me to. I know. He leaned back, pulling something from his coat pocket. It was a worn envelope. He handed it to her. Inside, old student appeals, faded and barely legible. A stack of them, typed complaints, handwritten rebuttals, all from students of color. Some barely written in proper format. Others structured like doctoral proposals. Every one marked dismissed without action. Lena read quietly, her throat tightening. I found these years ago, Ellis said. Never threw them out. Couldn't. Kids came and went. Some brilliant. Some broken. None remembered. She stared at one, a student named Ava McLean, who submitted a formal report about biased scoring in Royce's physics class in 2002. The report was detailed, citing test discrepancies, teacher comments, grading inconsistencies. The margin note on the last page read, "No clear evidence of instructor error. No further investigation required." I didn't know, Lena began. Course you didn't. That's the point. Riverhall's never been about racism, the way folks think. It's about absence, about pretending you never existed. You're not even the problem, they just don't want your question asked. Lena folded the appeals and tucked them into her bag. Something in her chest shifted, not rage, not pity, recognition. This wasn't just about her presentation anymore. It never was. It was about whether someone like her could even exist in their version of excellence. She stood up. Thank you, she said. Ellis nodded. You got 3 hours till sunrise. You best make it count. The next morning, Lena's hands were stained with graphite and ink. Her jacket smelled of dust and chalk. She slipped into the girls' bathroom, just after 6 to wash up. No one else was in the building yet. She turned on the tap, scrubbed her fingers, dried them on her sweater. She felt lightheaded, not from exhaustion, but from clarity. She walked out, cutting through the east corridor, passing the faculty lounge on her way to the forum hall. But something caught her eye. The staff restroom door was slightly ajar. She rarely noticed it, but something about the angle felt wrong to open. She pushed the door in slowly. She stepped closer. Her notes, her final set, the clean copies she had stored in a separate binder. Every page ripped, twisted, balled up, her diagrams torn into confetti, her summary sheet shredded into long, thin ribbons. She reached in, hands trembling. One page still had her handwriting visible across the torn line. She knew that handwriting, knew that pen. It was hers. Every page was hers. Her backup notes had been taken and destroyed. From her locker? From her bag? It didn't matter. Someone had gone through her things. Someone had made sure nothing remained untouched. The library was one thing. But this was invasive. This was personal. And still she didn't cry. She took one of the ripped pages and folded it carefully. Then she walked to the auditorium in silence. She stepped into the backstage area, and standing there, clipboard in hand, eyes cold and ready, was Professor Royce himself. And behind him, Brad Whitmore, smiling like the forum was already over. The whole school came to watch her fail. It started before sunrise. By 7:30 a.m., Riverhall's polished auditorium had turned into a spectacle. The double doors stayed propped open, as waves of students, teachers, board members, alumni, and local press filtered in, their footsteps echoing over the imported marble floors. Everything about the morning was immaculate, like a private college convocation. The program's cover read, Scholars Forum 2025, Honoring Tradition, Inspiring Excellence. Lena's name was listed last, her face in grayscale. Her title, misspelled, Corrective Analysis of the Riverhall Vector. She sat in the dim backstage area, her notebook pressed against her chest like a shield. Her fingers were ink-stained, her nerves silent, not calm but cold. Focused. On the other side of the curtain, the room buzzed. People weren't just waiting, they were anticipating. They had come to see the Black Scholarship girl crash. The girl who had dared to challenge not just a math problem, but the foundation that men like Royce had built reputations on. Degrees. Legacies. The girl who didn't belong, according to tradition. Royce himself sat in the front row, center seat, arms folded like a monarch, awaiting judgment. His eyes were steady, unreadable. Brad Whitmore, Riverhall's pride and platinum, would go first. Brad wore a navy suit stitched with his family crest on the lapel. His smile effortless, his posture practiced. Even the light seemed to favor him, glowing gold when he stepped onto the stage. Applause thundered before he even spoke. He opened with a quote from his grandfather, tossed in a joke about Newton being a Riverhall alum at heart. The audience chuckled. His slides glided from one high-definition simulation to the next. Orbital patterns, force vectors, color-coded graphics. Every reference was pristine, every sentence memorized, every pause perfectly timed for applause. He used phrases like reverence for classical thought and honoring structural elegance. At the 12-minute mark, he brought up the Riverhall vector problem and called it beautifully unsolvable, a testament to conceptual limitation. The crowd nodded, smiling like they had just watched a commercial for Legacy itself. Royce clapped first when Brad finished. Others stood, donors, faculty, some students. Not all, but enough. Brad bowed slightly and made a show of humility. Then he turned to look behind the curtain and smirked. Lena exhaled. Then came the silence. The auditorium lights dimmed slightly. A voice announced, without flair, next presenter, Lena Carver, grade 9. Project correcting the Riverhall vector problem. No clapping. Not right away. She stepped onto the stage, alone. She wore a pressed white shirt and black slacks, both ironed by hand. Her shoes weren't new, but polished until they caught the light. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, neat bun. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. She's really doing this? No slide? Is this part of the show? She reached the chalkboard and paused. The auditorium stretched before her like a canyon, hundreds of eyes watching. Her vision narrowed. Everything behind the first two rows faded. She saw Royce, leaning slightly forward, half a smile. A trustee whispered to a guest, "Experimental phase. Give it a minute." Lena turned, faced the chalkboard, picked up a single piece of chalk. Not from the original problem. Not from Royce's framing. A new equation. Her equation. A collective breath seemed to hold across the room. The curvature of her first formula was sharp, asymmetric. It didn't obey the symmetry expected in Royce's original assumptions. It introduced instability from the start. She spoke, clearly. The Riverhall vector problem assumes closed system symmetry under fixed point torque influence. I challenge that assumption. Murmurs rose in the back. One student dropped a pen. She kept going. She introduced the first principle, dynamic torque in variable mass distribution. Then the second, the error rate of applying Newtonian stability assumptions to non-conserved rotational systems. Someone in the second row, a visiting professor, leaned forward and frowned. She didn't blink. She wrote faster, filling the board. The chalk dust caught the light like smoke. Lena's voice cut through the tension. "I believe the original problem was framed using beautiful math but flawed reality. I believe it was elegant on paper but impossible by design." A gasp, audible now. She turned to face them. "This is not a solution," she said. "It's a correction. It's not what I was taught. It's what I learned." She drew a second line, one that challenged Royce's own 1989 paper. She cited torque variables, non-inertial systems, and listed 3 footnotes from journals that hadn't existed when the problem was created. Royce's smirk faltered. Lena paused, then stepped to the right side of the board. The crowd was stone silent. Then she said, "Let me show you why the problem was built to collapse." And with that, she began her demonstration. The final line she wrote didn't solve the vector problem. It rewrote it. And no one in the room had ever seen it before. For a moment, no one in the auditorium moved. The equation Lena had just written across the board still hung in the air like smoke from a fire alarm. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't even a correction in the traditional sense. It was a reframing. She stood still, chalk in hand, heart pounding. "I didn't come here to solve the Riverhall vector problem," Lena said. Her voice didn't tremble, because it was never designed to be solved. It was designed to be admired. Murmurs rippled through the back rows. She continued, slower now. "It assumes that a closed system operates under perfect rotational stability. That's elegant math. But real-world dynamics don't obey elegance. They obey behavior, friction, chaos, time." She walked along the board, underlining a segment with her palm. "This term here, constant torque influence, collapses under multi-body interaction. It was never accounted for, because it didn't fit the shape of the answer." Brad Whitmore sat frozen, lips slightly parted. His pen had stopped moving halfway through a note. He didn't understand what she had just done. Not completely. But he knew it was different. Dangerous. Royce didn't blink. He stared straight ahead, unmoving. Then Lena stepped toward the center of the stage, and with her free hand, flipped open her notebook. "I built a model based on rotating field behavior using variable density momentum. Not to solve the original problem, but to rewrite the conditions under which the question is even valid." She turned and drew again. New symbols. New assumptions. She moved fast, but not frantically. With intent. Purpose. Her voice softened as she filled in the blanks. "This framework allows for predictive anomalies across the 5th cycle. If you integrate angular drift here," she paused, "you discover the system doesn't close. Because it was never supposed to." Dead silent. Not from confusion. One professor in the back dropped his pen. The sound echoed louder than Lena's footsteps. She capped the chalk, turned to face the crowd, and said, "It was never unsolvable. It was just never questioned." Gasps. Real this time. The auditorium transformed from passive to electric. Lena stood alone in the spotlight, the board behind her still filled with lines that bent the room's reality. She bowed her head slightly and stepped back. Nothing happened. No applause. No standing ovation. Just stunned, absolute stillness. Until a voice rang out, calm and clear. "Miss Carver." Lena looked up. An older man in a charcoal blazer stood at the far end of the aisle, just behind the last faculty row. His name tag caught the light. Dr. William Resnick, MIT Department of Theoretical Physics. "May I speak with you after the session?" Royce twitched. The auditorium reacted before Lena did. Heads turned. Whispers surged. She nodded slowly. Riznik gave a small smile and sat down. From the far side of the room, Roy stood up, slowly, and walked out, without a word. Winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. For several seconds after Lena left the stage, the room held its breath. Then came the clapping. But it wasn't the kind reserved for triumph. It was cautious, scattered, almost confused, like no one quite knew if it was safe to react. Some students clapped because others did. A few teachers followed, their applause polite, uncommitted. The donors and trustees gave nothing at all. Royce sat still, hands tight in his lap, jaw like stone. It was the sound of a system trying to pretend it hadn't just been cracked. Lena stepped backstage into a world quieter than the one she'd left. The hum of anticipation had vanished. The energy backstage had dropped an octave, now hushed, stiff, awkward. Brad Whitmore was gone. His presentation had evaporated the moment Lena rewrote the math. There was no congratulations, no confrontation, just absence. The other student speakers averted their eyes. No one said great job. No one asked how she felt. Only one person moved toward her, Dr. William Resnick. He approached like someone entering a fragile moment. "Lena," he said gently, offering a hand. That was more than impressive. It was paradigm shifting. She shook his hand, steady. "I want to talk," he continued. "There's a program we run at MIT, off the books for now. Research mentorship. Real resources. Real labs. You'd fit in. You'd lead." She didn't hesitate. "Thank you. But I'm not leaving Riverhall. Not yet." His brow furrowed, surprised. "They tried to erase you." She nodded. "That's exactly why I have to stay." Risnick studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow, respectful nod. "Then make sure they remember you. Every day." By the time Lena returned to her seat in the auditorium, the session had already shifted to closing remarks. Royce had not returned to his chair. The headmaster gave a safe, meandering speech about student excellence and expanding perspectives. But Lena's name was never mentioned.
Not once.
The following Monday felt colder than Chicago's January air. Lena walked the halls like a spotlight. Some students glanced at her and then away, their expressions guarded. Others whispered louder than necessary. She made Royce look stupid. She embarrassed the school. She cheated. She just memorized something weird. In AP Calculus, 3 students got up and changed seats when Lena sat down. No one said anything. The teacher didn't stop them. In the cafeteria, a girl from her advisory group leaned in and asked quietly, "Did you have help? Like, outside tutoring?" "You can tell me." Lena looked up. "I did it myself." The girl blinked. "Wow, that's intense," and then left. It wasn't just the students. The teachers were split. Mrs. Chang gave her a quiet nod in the hallway and muttered, "Proud of you." Mr. Hodges, however, returned her homework with a red slash through a correct proof, and the note, "Show your original work." She had twice. Ms. Rivers, the guidance counselor, called her in and said, "You stirred up something big. It might take a while for things to settle." Lena asked, "What if they're not supposed to settle?" Ms. Rivers had no answer. But some reactions weren't silent. In the girls' restroom, someone had scrawled on the stall in marker, "Not our genius." In physics club, 3 students resigned by email, one citing that the club was no longer aligned with traditional values. Even when Lena walked into the library, the student aide behind the desk glanced at her, then slid a returned textbook across the counter with a little too much force. But it wasn't all pushback. A freshman named Zoe stopped her near the lockers and said, "You made me want to stay in robotics." A sophomore from the debate team handed her a folded note after class. "When you stood up there, you weren't just speaking math. You were proving we belong here too." Mr. Ellis printed her equation and tacked it inside his closet. Above it, he taped a sticky note, "Some chalk stays permanent." That moment grounded her. Still, she carried the day in fragments. The applause that felt unsure. The hallway stares. The absence of any acknowledgement from Royce or administration. Not a single email. Not a formal thank you. Not a single official word. As if the event had never happened. As if she hadn't been there. 2 weeks passed. No assembly. No newsletter highlights. No photos from the forum posted to the Riverhall website. Lena checked twice. It was as if she had rewritten the math, and they had rewritten the memory. She buried herself in work. Helped relaunch the physics club. Offered tutoring 3 days a week. quietly sent her proof to 4 open-source math journals under a pseudonym, Elsie Fields. Each morning she arrived 10 minutes earlier. Each night, she left 10 minutes later. She didn't say more than necessary, but she made herself visible. There was strength in staying seen. One Thursday, her locker was jammed. Not the kind of jam from use, the kind from intent. She forced it open with her shoulder. Inside was a piece of paper. No envelope. Folded sharply. Lena opened it. One sentence. Typed, no signature. You may have won the room, but not the system. No threat. Just fact. Her stomach turned. She looked around. The hallway was empty, but she had felt the presence before. Lena read the line again, then refolded the paper slowly, precisely, and slipped it into her notebook beside her original forum draft. Then she looked up. Across the hallway, standing at the far end, partially hidden behind the faculty mailboxes, was Royce, just watching, not speaking, not blinking. And then he turned and walked away. In that moment, Lena realized, defeating a theory was only the beginning. Now came the fight to survive the silence. Exposing a lie is one thing. Surviving it is another. The letter sat in her locker like a ticking bomb. No envelope, no return address, just a single line on cream stock paper. You may have won the room, but not the system. No threats. No profanity. That made it worse. Lena stared at the note, her pulse racing. Not because she feared it. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. Someone had seen what she did on that stage. Not just seen it, but felt it as a threat. Someone who wanted her to know, the stage wasn't the battlefield. The battlefield was behind the curtain. She didn't tell her mother about the note. Tanya Carver already looked at her daughter with equal parts pride and fear, like she was watching her climb a ladder that leaned on unstable walls. Lena didn't want to add bricks to that weight. Not yet. So she took it to school, slipped a letter between 2 notebook pages and began to ask questions. Quietly. Casually. At first, she started with the printers. Riverhall's computer lab ran on an internal system. Students had to log in with ID numbers to print. Lena accessed her profile and checked logs. Nothing recent. Nothing that could match the letter. She tried checking public access logs. Denied. Tried asking the IT aide who monitored the lab. He gave her a strange look and said, "We don't share those logs with students. Privacy policy." She didn't push, just thanked him, and walked away. But a thought rooted in her mind. Who prints without a name? Her answer came not through data, but whispers. Late one afternoon she heard 2 seniors talking near the east stairwell, where the vending machines hummed louder than voices. "Bro, you seriously think they're gonna let him get valedictorian after that speech? Doesn't matter. The Griffins'll fix it. Like they fixed Miller." "Yeah, but Miller got caught plagiarizing." "No. He spoke up about admissions bias. Then they found something." Lena stood just around the corner, pretending to scroll through her phone, pretending not to listen. Griffins. She'd never heard that term before in school. Not in any handbook, assembly, or club fair. That made it real. The next day she approached the only person at Riverhall who'd never lied to her face.
"Mr. Ellis."
She found him outside the science wing, spraying graffiti cleaner over a vending machine. Someone had slapped a Riverhaul sticker on. "You ever heard of something called the Order of Griffins?" Lena asked. He didn't flinch, just kept scrubbing. Then said, "Where'd you hear that name?" She lowered her voice. "East stairwell. Seniors. Said they fixed someone's grades. That they can get people removed." Ellis finally stopped. He looked at her. Really looked. "You don't know what you just stepped into," he said.
"Then teach me."
He leaned on his mop handle, sighing like a man exhausted from carrying secrets too long.
"They're not a club, not like chess or mock trial. They don't meet after school or wear badges. They've been around longer than any teacher here, since the school's founding. All sons of donors, politicians, old money."
What do? They influence. That's the word. Influence who gets what? Scholarships, awards, letters. They're the ones who decide if someone like you gets to be a fluke or a problem. Lena frowned. Why would they come after me? Ellis gave her a hard look. Because you didn't just solve a problem. You exposed one. And you did it in front of every donor and faculty member in this building. She felt her stomach twist. "What about Brad?" she asked. Ellis's eyes narrowed. His grandfather helped build the Griffins retreat house. They used to meet off campus there. Still not. She swallowed hard. So this letter, Ellis interrupted, is just the beginning. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She pulled up every alumni page on the school website, every board member biography, every archived yearbook photo she could find. No mention of the Griffins, but she started noticing patterns. 3 years ago, a student named Alina Torres was denied valedictorian, despite having the highest GPA. A week later, her record showed an F in gym retroactively added. She disappeared from the site. 4 years ago, Jordan Miller published an op-ed in the school newspaper about racial disparities in AP course enrollment. He was removed for plagiarism 6 days later. No article remained online. Lena found a PDF of the issue in an archived student Tumblr blog. The article was real. It began, "It's not that Riverhall is bad, it's that it's curated. Curated for legacies." Lena printed it and stared at the final sentence. "If you speak too clearly in this place, you'll find out how quiet a room can get." She knew what was coming. On Monday morning, a tan envelope was slipped into her advisory folder. Stamped Academic Review Committee. Lena opened it with steady hands. Subject: Inquiry into potential academic misconduct. Forum presentation. Due to questions regarding the originality and sourcing of your presentation at the Scholars Forum, you are being reviewed for potential academic misconduct. Please report to the committee room, Building D, Room on 17, at 2:30 p.m. Friday. Bring all supporting documentation. Do not discuss this notice with other students until review. She read it twice. Then again. Each word stung less than the ones they didn't include.
No thank you.
No acknowledgement. Just suspicion. She folded the letter. Closed her locker. When she turned, half the hallway was looking at her. Some out of curiosity. Some out of expectation. Some smirking. Brad walked past her without a word. But he didn't need to speak. She knew. This wasn't about chalk. It was about control. Lena stared at the hallway full of eyes and made a silent vow. If they want a fight in the shadows, they're about to learn she's not afraid of the dark. They accused her of cheating on the problem she invented. Friday arrived like a verdict. By midday, Riverhall's corridors hummed with an unspoken caution. Students whispered in hushed clusters, teachers paused mid-whisper, and the afternoon light filtered in thin slats through tall windows like judgment beams. Lena moved through it all with quiet purpose, clutching her notes folder tighter with each step. At exactly 2:30 p.m., she entered room 117 of Building D. The walls were beige, windowless, its dull fluorescent lighting buzzing overhead. A shapeless institutional grayness filled the space, like a poorly lit backstage for a show she never auditioned for. One retired judge, Mr. Barrows, whose reputation for impartiality was legendary. 2 faculty members, one from English, one from chemistry. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Rivers, ambivalent and composed. And of course Professor Alden Royce. His posture was an armor of confidence. His eyes studied her, but they didn't soften. He held a stack of papers, as if ready to raise each one in protest. Lena held her breath. The counselor leaned forward. "This is not a disciplinary action," she began, her voice soft but stark, "merely a review." It sounded like a lie. "You're here because there are concerns about the originality of your Scholars Forum presentation, specifically regarding whether the theoretical framework was authored independently or with assistance. We also have questions regarding sourcing, citations, and whether standard academic conventions were followed." Lena's throat tightened, but she spoke clearly. "I understand, and I invited this review. Everything in my presentation, not just the equations, but the framing, I created, drafted, and revised myself." She slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were her handwritten pages, multiple drafts, overlay sketches, library photocopies, timestamps, public paper references, all evidence traced back to her hand. The judge flipped through them with quiet certainty. Royce cleared his throat. "I must object," he said, voice cold. "While Miss Carver may assert personal authorship, the method she presents relies on formulations that replicate terminology from late 1980s theoretical frameworks." She referenced an obscure torque drift constant, the same language used in a period paper. "The style of notation is virtually identical." Lena held his gaze. "My reference was to Royce's own outdated framework. I dismantled it. I reinterpreted it. The symbols may resemble your own, but the reasoning is different." Royce didn't flinch. The English professor spoke next. "Miss Carver, your bibliography is impressive, but you frequently cite authors who were not part of Riverhall curriculum. Where did you access these sources?" Lena responded, online academic repositories, open access universities, public databases, not Riverhall's library. Anyone can access them. A professor from chemistry nodded. You even included a 2022 particle dynamics study, not commonly taught here. You likely accessed it off campus, through free academic resources, publicly available, she said and paused. None of it was flagged or restricted. Royce interjected, but without supervision or clear institutional guidance, such unverified sourcing is risky. We must safeguard academic integrity. Lena leaned forward. With respect, but integrity doesn't lie in tradition. It lies in honesty. And all of this came from my own research. The eyes around the table shifted. For a moment, there was power in her silence, like she had revealed something bigger than equations. Then an unexpected moment. The counselor cleared her throat and opened another envelope. We also received this correspondence today, from Dr. William Resnick, Department of Theoretical Physics, MIT. She unfolded a printed letter. Dr. Resnick's voice came alive in black type. To the Riverhall Academic Review Committee. I write to express my unequivocal support for Lena Carver's work. Her symposium presentation at the Scholars Forum exhibits independent development of a theoretical model with implications beyond current educational boundaries. She is not only original, she's trailblazing. I request to personally supervise her work through MIT's early mentorship pathway. The letters dissolved any remaining control in the room. Royce's paper stack twitched in his hand. The retired judge leaned back, clearly considering. Mrs. Rivers looked torn. Lena didn't flinch. At that moment, the room shifted. The power dynamic changed. This wasn't an interrogation anymore. It was an intersection. Tradition bearing itself to innovation. The judge closed his folder. This review panel will deliberate now, he said, sliding the papers to one side. Miss Carver, please wait outside. We will notify you of our decision. Lena nodded, voice steady. One thing, she said, voice slightly quivering. I stand by the integrity of my work. And if the definition of academic misconduct is refusing to stay silent, then I'll accept any consequences. Room went cold. No one responded. She walked out, leaving the folder behind. Her hand trembled only slightly, as she sat on a metal chair in the hallway. Time melted. Minutes passed. She heard faint voices inside whispered absolution. Or a debate. She couldn't tell. Her pulse raced. Then the door opened. The counselor emerged, holding a thick beige envelope. It's here, she said softly. The decision. Lena took the envelope with steady hands and looked into the hallway. Her classmates leaning in, no one knowing whether to laugh or cry. The door closed behind her, leaving only one direction to go. Inside. The system that doubted her had done worse to others. Lena stepped out into the afternoon hallway, with the formal letter still clutched in her hand. A cold, corporate response to an academic feat that had shaken the foundation of the school. The corridor's fluorescent lights flickered for a moment, echoing the lithium tremor in her chest. She made her way toward Mr. Ellis, who was quietly sweeping bits of paper near the science wing. She didn't show him the envelope. Instead, she asked, voice low and steady, "Do you know anything about students who came before me? Those who spoke out?" Ellis paused. His mop rested against the wall. He looked weary, as if deciding whether he could keep telling stories that wanted to stay silent. "Show me," he finally said, nodding toward an unused copy room. Inside, behind a locked cabinet, he produced a battered accordion file, labeled Archives, Student Reports 1980, 2000. She caught her breath. He pushed the file across the table. "Go slow," he said. "There's a pattern." Lena flipped open the top folder, 1985, Physics. A black student named Marcus Bell. Top grades in physics. Invited to the Scholars Forum. Then weeks later, grades revised. Problems marked wrong by Royce himself. Marcus never returned to school. Next folder, 1987, Chemistry Club. Darnell Hayes proposed an experiment on variable torque dynamics, almost the same topic. His idea was dismissed as plagiarism. His family was pressured to leave. More names followed. Tasha Irwin, Andre Kim, Simone Banks, all black students or students of color, all with strong records, all suddenly erased or pushed out. Lena's vision blurred, but she forced herself keen. One folder had Royce's name in bold, 1994 Physics Complaint. Under it, a letter from a parent complaining Royce changed grades mid-semester. The response, results upheld. No procedural violation. The student's record marked withdrawn. Lena's fingers grew sticky. Ellis leaned in, voice quiet. They weren't mistakes. They were protection. So no one noticed the cracks. She closed her eyes. You saved all this? He nodded. It's why I stayed. To remember. Lena took notes, then typed the stories into a report. She cross-referenced documents, photocopies, archived emails, not hidden but buried. That night, she crafted a letter, addressed the Riverhall School Board, local media, an investigative education columnist, the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. In clear factual prose, no emotion wasted, she laid it all out. Evidence of grade manipulation, disproportionate disciplinary actions against black students, Royce's personal involvement, the hidden pressure on families like hers. She attached Ellis's statements, the original letters, Marcus's report, all the fragments she'd uncovered. She hit send at midnight. Fast forward to early morning. Notifications pinged. School administrators were alerted. The press had a tip. The Department of Education's investigator had requested preliminary documentation. Lena watched her inbox flood. Emails. Received. Thank you. A reporter. Can we talk? Department staff, we're opening an inquiry. The dawn felt heavy with consequences. By 10 a.m., a public announcement came across the school PA. An emergency meeting of the Board of Trustees will convene at 5 p.m. today in the main auditorium. Families, faculty, and media are invited. The words echoed. She stood outside Mr. Ellis's supply closet. He peeked out. This changes everything, she said. He nodded, eyes distant. Good. As the school buzzed into midday frenzy, Lena watched the clock. At 5, Riverhall's secret world of control would be exposed. And she would face the reckoning she had rewritten history to reveal. He built a legacy on silence. She tore it down with facts. Inside Riverhall's grand auditorium, the emergency board meeting began under unusually heavy silence. It wasn't just a regular gathering, it was the reckoning the school had long avoided. News crews had already surrounded the building. Hashtags glowed on student phones. Parents crowded the lobby. The room felt charged, alive with the weight of what was about to happen. Lena sat near the front, between her mother and Mr. Ellis. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt raw, like a wound turned outward. Across the broad stage, chandeliers stuttered in the dim light. Banners bearing the school crest hung overhead, untouched by dust until tonight. The head of the board, Ms. Davenport, called the meeting to order. Her voice was precise, calm. She invited statements from the former students, the investigative team, and then ending with Royce. First, video testimonials rolled. Past students appeared, footage grainy, if you squinted like old memories flickering to life. One after another, quietly, painfully, they spoke. I was 14 when I submitted my findings on rotational field theory. Royce told me it was sloppy, that I lacked fundamentals. My scholarship was revoked. My science fair project won regional. But when I said the torque vector felt off, Royce called it a prank. My name no longer appears in the archives. Each face on screen was a ghost. A part of the school's erased history materialized through pixel and voice. As the last video ended, the auditorium broke soft sobs from the front, murmurs echoing. Lena swallowed. This was their truth, written not in chalk but carved out of silence. Next, Miss Davenport introduced Lena's investigation. A slide appeared behind her charts, arches of red pen, timelines of grade reversals, snippets of Royce's review notes, phone logs, email chains. The evidence was exhaustive. It was factual and undeniable. A hush followed. One trustee turned and whispered to another. This is systemic. Then, Royce stood. He appeared smaller than before. His suit looked off, his tie crooked. The man who once commanded rooms now seemed off script. He cleared his throat and spoke, stiffly. I request to speak. He paced slowly, eyes unfocused. No smirk today, no confident cadence. I made mistakes, he began. In hindsight, some of my grading may have been harsh. I see that now. He looked at Lena. I may have acted out of personal bias, and I apologize. The auditorium held its breath. He continued. I accept the board's decision to suspend me. I offer my resignation if that's what's demanded. Silence. His confession echoed. The board deliberated. Lena stared at her notebook pages. Unedited, archived, permanent. Then the headmaster, voice trembling, spoke. For the integrity of this institution and in recognition of the truth revealed here, Royce is suspended, pending investigation. Formal resignation is being discussed. The room erupted in applause, but it wasn't celebratory. It sounded like release. Royce didn't cry. He just left. The announcements came next. Riverhall's official statement. Effective immediately, we will perform a systemic audit of grading and disciplinary records. A new equity committee will be formed, inclusive of alumni voices, current students, and external oversight. The restructure was historic. It was a promise, a pledge. But Lena didn't feel the pride the headlines later proclaimed. She felt seen. She became a symbol that day. A representation of resistance. Students lined up to thank her. Some even asked for her autograph. Strange, surreal gestures. Yet all she ever wanted was to be seen. Lena went home that night. The cameras outside flashed by as she passed. The headlines popped. Black girl topples Riverhall icon. Young scholar unmasks elite legacy. She stared at her phone. Messages unread. Offers. Interviews. Congratulations. Then the headmaster's email appeared. Lena, you have my deepest respect. We would like to offer you early graduation and a full scholarship at any partner university. Effective immediately. She stared at it. Her mind replayed the day. An offer. One she had heard whispered in the hallways before, but never believed. She texted back. Why? The reply came minutes later. Because you don't belong here anymore. Tears didn't come. Instead, Lena shut the phone and walked into her room. She sat at her desk. The warmth of chalk dust, the color of her notes, the echo of footsteps in lecture hall. All of it felt like her truth. She thought of the faces in the video testimonies, of Mr. Ellis's eyes, of the boardroom silence after Royce's apology. She pressed send on another email. This one accepting the scholarship, but adding, I request deferment. I'm not done here. Lena walked to her window that overlooked the campus quad. In the center of the lawn, students had gathered, holding small candles in solidarity. As dusk fell and each candle flickered to life, Lena realized she didn't have to leave to be heard. She could transform the place from within. She could leave, but leaving meant they'd never have to face her. Everyone expected her to take the offer. The early graduation, the full scholarship to MIT, an open invitation to leave Riverhall behind. Even her own headmaster had framed it as a reward. You've earned this. Those words echoed like an exoneration. But to Lena they felt less like closure and more like erasure. A delicate punctuation mark. Exit stage left. No more disruptions. No more questions. She couldn't accept that. Not yet. The next morning she arrived in the quad earlier than usual. The sky was pale blue, light breaking over the trees, birds skittering in the distance. She took a steady breath and made her decision. She was staying. Not because she had somewhere better to go, but because Riverhall, the institution that had created the problem, deserved better. The same way she had corrected a flawed equation, she intended to correct a flawed culture. She walked to the student council office and introduced herself. She wore jeans and a sweater. Casual. Grounded. She didn't need the folder or presentation anymore. She didn't want to ask. She argued. It's not your position, said Miss Carter, the advisor. But if you have a plan, I want to lead. Lena interrupted. But not just the council. I want to change our curriculum. The history department doesn't show Rosa Parks. The science department doesn't teach Katherine Johnson. I'll draft a syllabus and present it. The room went quiet. Then she saw the shimmering, unguarded respect in Miss Carter's eyes. Come prepared, she said, and bring others. Within a week, Lena had formed a working group. 2 seniors from student council, a passionate Black History Club leader named Amina, the debate team captain, and a visibly nervous junior interested in engineering. She drafted a plan: Black excellence across syllabi, guest speaker series in STEM, mentorship events for students of color. At her first presentation to the faculty board, she stood in front of the same auditorium that once judged her. Slides showed gaps in representation. She cited research connecting diverse curricula to better student outcomes. She ended with, inclusion is not charity. It's completeness. There was pushback, some gentle, some not. But the atmosphere had changed. Critiques became discussions. A proposal was written. Seeds of reform were planted. Lena didn't wait to be recognized. She organized a science mentorship program for younger Black students, calling it Ignite. She paired upperclassmen with middle schoolers, introduced complex topics, particle physics, astrophysics, framed not as exotic but as natural. She introduced Dr. Resnick via livestream for a Q&A session. The room went from 5 participants to 30 mid-level apprentices. Only one person asked if she was trying to replace Royce. She smiled. "I'm making space, not taking over." Mr. Ellis's retirement announcement arrived one spring morning via email announcement. Succinct and somber. After 25 years of service, Mr. Robert Ellis is retiring. His final day is Friday.
No fanfare, no ceremony, nothing in the newsletter.
Lena found him cleaning the stairs behind the auditorium. "I tried to find a painting," she said, voice soft. "A plaque. Anything." He leaned on the mop. "Never wanted one," he said. "Just did the job." Lena thought of the secret archives file. The letters. The truth hatched in his cabinet. "What did you mean when you said I was the storm they never saw coming?" He smiled. "Pale. Because you knocked down doors without raising your voice. They can rebuild walls, but not the moment you stood in theirs." She handed him a note. Folded. Neat. "Thank you for remembering the names that Riverhall tried to forget." He nodded and turned to unlock the janitor's closet, revealing a framed print of Lena's chalkboard proof pinned inside, etched not in words but permanence. He said, "It belongs here." The school year edged toward graduation. Riverhall felt different. Not uniform. Not still. Not silent. Hallways had conversations. Student government had empathy. Teachers apologized, subtly shifting approach. Students of color began dominating student council elections for the first time in decades. Even library late hours, once off limits to minority students, were open on request, if accompanied by mentors. Lena kept her grades. She completed Ignite sessions, drafted revisions to Riverhall's statement of values. One evening she found Justice Club discussing restorative discipline models, not punishment but accountability. Her chest warmed at their language choice. Later, she studied in the courtyard. Night shifted to stillness. The fountain shimmered silver under a full moon. She remembered the first day when she felt out of place. Not now. Weeks later, long after the sun had set, she walked Hall C toward the lockers, toward her nightly route home. She passed the legacy wall. Once it had felt like a painting mocking her ambition. A gallery of white faces preside over her absence. But tonight it felt different. A luminescent glow. She paused. At the far end, a man in a janitor's jacket had dimmed the lights to highlight one frame. She moved closer. Her face, her presentation photo, smiled back at her. Chalk-dusted hands, determined eyes, no nameplate yet. Just the picture in a simple black frame, newly added. Next to it an empty spot. A hook, as if waiting. Her heart started slow, then peaked. She stood, framed by past excellence and future promise. Lena turned the corner and found Mr. Barrows, the retired judge, leaning casually against a dark bronze plaque, carving out new school values. He nodded. "Your wall is waiting. Will you tell them your name?" Lena looked back at the face behind glass. "Yes," she said, voice quiet as thunder. "Tell them my name. The hardest thing to calculate isn't physics. It's human dignity." Years had passed. Lena stood on the stage of Riverhall's ivy-gripped auditorium, not as a nervous freshman but as a poised guest of honor. Graduation day glowed overhead. Morning sunlight streamed in through tall arched windows, illuminating cap-and-gown-clad students and teary-eyed families. Sequences of banners now declared new values: justice, transparency, empathy, stitched where legacy once dominated. She looked out over the sea of faces. Proud parents, beaming students, faculty nodding in recognition. The chalkboard behind her held its old chalk-dust blue frame. Faint lines of her revolutionary equation still traced the surface deep into the center, now preserved under glass. An altar to change. Lena inhaled and began. "Class of 25, she said, steady and resonant. "Today you are recognized not just for grades, but for integrity, truth, and the courage to question." The room rested on her words, their quiet power washing through the rows of gowns. It's easy to teach formulas, but harder to teach honesty. She paused, letting silence underscore the weight. "Years ago I walked these halls, chalk in hand, not to solve physics, not even to win. I stood up to ask a question the school had never dared ask. Why was the problem framed that way to begin with?" Heads shifted, some recalling a bottled-up summer debate, others hearing a legacy redefined. She nodded toward the enclosed chalkboard. It represents more than a formula now. It's a symbol. Her fingers brushed the glass softly, tracing the lines. I once believed the bravest thing was solving the problem. But I've learned it can be braver to ask why it exists at all. The words pierced the hush. Ladies and gentlemen, the true equation we cannot ignore is not about mass, velocity, or torque. It's about human dignity. Each variable here, the names erased, the voices silenced, we accounted for them. And now, together, we balance the books. A ripple of applause flowed through the auditorium, quiet at first, but it built. Soon, faculty and students alike rose, flooded by something deeper than pride, relief, belonging, recognition. From the crowd, a small outline curled at the edge of the platform. A young black girl, barely 13, watched with wide, honest eyes. She held her scholarship letter, like a token of possibility. Lena noticed her. After the speech, as she stepped down, the girl ran forward. "Miss Carver?" she asked softly. I watched you walk that walk. It made me believe I belong here." Lena knelt, heart surged. She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "You do belong," she said. "More than that, you'll help shape what belongs next."
The ceremony ended.
In the hush of the hallway after applause faded, Lena found herself alone before the chalkboard. Her formula wasn't just teaching math anymore. It taught courage. She traced her reflection in the glass. Behind her, footsteps echoed. The headmaster, Dr. Sterling, approached quietly. He cleared his throat. "Lena," he said, voice soft, "you've given this place a mirror for the first time. We're grateful. Would it be all right to make your equation a permanent part of the curriculum?" He gestured toward the board, now preserved like a relic. Lena's breath caught. "Yes," she said after a moment. "Let them learn from it every year." He nodded, emotion raw. "Thank you." There was a hush in the hall as families gathered. Lena watched the young girl leave to join her parents, face alight with pride and possibility. Lena inhaled again, mindful of every memory, her first day at Riverhall, the discarded test papers, the chalk dust, the confrontation on stage, the letter, the hearing, the reforms, the legacy wall, and now this moment, her lesson etched in permanence. The camera lingered on the chalkboard. As Lena walked away, the line of her equation still glowed faintly through the glass, a constant in the shifting light of history, and etched between the chalked symbols, nearly invisible but there for those who looked close. The face of a girl who dared to ask why. If you've ever felt the weight of being unseen, if you've ever watched someone brave enough to stand alone, then you know this story isn't just Lena's. It's all of ours. Type yes if you believe silence should never win. Subscribe if this broke your heart.